I'd like to welcome everybody back to the regular meeting of the Kernersville Board of Aldermen. This meeting was continued from Tuesday. We'll begin with Agenda Item 1A, which is a public hearing on rezoning, docket K784. The rezoning in question is a 9.44 acre tract, with the first phase being 5.93 acres and the two phase being 3.51 acres. It's a rezoning proposal from RS20 and HBS to LBS for properties located at 1020 North Main Street. The uses proposed are as presented in the Planning Board report. So the first phase would limit the use to a food and drug store. The two phase would have the listed uses in the staff report and the Planning Board report, removing the use shopping center and removing the use church or religious institution community. All right, we'll begin the meeting with a roll call since it is a remote meeting. Mayor Pro Tem Fulton is not present today. She's absent. Alderman Kenny Cruz.
Present, thank you.
Thank you. Alderman Chris Thompson.
I'm present, thank you.
Thank you. Alderman Joe Penix.
I'm present, thank you.
Thank you. Alderman Bruce Boyer.
I'm present, thank you.
Thank you. We send our thoughts out to Mayor Pro Tem Fulton and hope she feels better soon. All right. So we've had the public hearing. Are there any further questions, comments, or discussion by members of the board? Oh, I'm sorry. Let's go ahead and establish who in our staff is here. Town Manager Curtis Swisher is here on the call, as well as our Business Analyst Information Systems, Mateus Silva. Mr. Swisher, if you can identify the staff that's present on the call.
We have John Wolf, Town Attorney, Ed Powell, Assistant Town Attorney, Jeff Hatling, Community Development Director, Scott Alderman, Fire Rescue Chief, Franz Ader, Finance Director, and we have Daniel Brooks. I don't know if he's on the call with IT. We also have Chief Summers in the courtroom and Crystal Tanner, HR Director, in the courtroom.
Ray Thomas, attorney for petitioner, is also available should the board have any questions. All right. Again, is there any further discussion, comments, or questions, or do I have a motion?
I'll be glad to at least make some comments. That I've spent a lot of time on this particular rezoning case, listened to all the meetings of the Planning Board and the Planning Board work session. And so I've worked pretty hard on that. And I know that the Food Line people and Mr. Thomas have also worked very hard to provide us information. And so that homework really was to weigh the pros and cons of this rezoning case. I understand that this could improve Food Lion's capabilities with a more modern store and the features that are possible with a reconfigured store that would be constructed new. But I also understand our planning professionals' concern that this would create a hotspot on the edge of town and the likelihood that it could attract current businesses on the north side of town that want to be near that hotspot. So it would likely be much harder to lease space in the current North Main commercial area. I think we'd be creating the start of a hotspot at the expense perhaps of our commercial area. I think this is a pivotal decision because I think it's going to would turn, if we approve it, a rural area into a commercial area with a large store, and which I know that grocery stores are very essential. We all need to be near them, whereas other stores perhaps are more optional. But having this on the outskirts, the development on the outskirts of town would change the plan of being a small-scale village setting that is in the land use plan that was actually created after we knew that the road was coming. I think it was an attempt to try and moderate the development in that area. So my opinion, and I'll just toss this out for other board members to take shots at or whatever, is I think it's wise to adhere to the land use plan that was developed after we knew of this intersection. So I just wanted to put that out there to give my perspective.
Would anyone else like to comment? Be sure to turn your microphone on if you would. Alderman Penix, do you have any comments at this time?
Well, I know that there have been pros and cons on this. Just from my perspective, for what it's worth, the phone calls and the emails I got were probably 90% in favor of it. And the reason that most people gave me were that they felt like the north end of town had been left out, that they want a modern grocery store on that end of town, to keep them from having to drive all the way through Kernersville into South Main Street area to do their grocery shopping. Otherwise, they'll be going out of town to Walkertown in some instances, to Oak Ridge or Stokesdale to do their shopping. And that was the opinion they gave me. And I know it differs from the land use plan. My feeling is sometimes you have to change with the times, and we can't foresee the future every time we have a long range plan. So that's the approach I'm taking to it.
Alderman Thompson, do you have any comments?
I'm going to refrain my comments until I vote. Mayor Morgan, thank you.
All right. Alderman Cruz, do you have any comments or questions at this time?
I'm like Mr. Penix. I've had a lot of calls and a lot of comments on it, and I feel like North Main Street has been sort of bypassed. And with the opportunity we have here to work with Food Line, that's been one of our great neighbors, and with all the planning changes, I don't think that we can be fair with it to set a plan and just stick to it by whatever one organization or one group figures. As fast as the times are changing, we've got to change with them. We've got to stay up to the plow or completely stop. So that's all I have. All the people that have called me asking for it. I've had a couple that didn't want it, but I've had so many that were in favor till that's left us with a decision that we have to make.
Thank you, Mr. Cruz. If there's no further discussion, is there a motion?
Madam Mayor, just to clarify for everyone, I received updated acreage shortly before the meeting from Mr. Hatling.
Okay,
the total acreage is 9.44, and phase 1 is 5.93. Phase 2 is 3.51. The revised said 3.59, but it's 3.51 for a total of 9.44. And that has been uploaded to the agenda online.
Okay, and I saw online that you had received comments, posted them, and distributed them. And is there anything you need to add to the record about comments that were made in that 24-hour period following the public hearing.
All the comments have been posted online, including the revised comment from the petitioner.
Okay, thank you. John Wolf, is there anything further that needs to be done procedurally prior to calling for a motion?
No, ma'am. I think the revision of the acreage is great, and I think you're fine to go with the possibility of a motion.
Okay. Do I have a motion?
I'll make the motion to approve.
Mr. Hatling, do you have a motion in a format recommended by staff for Mr. Cruz reference?
So with the motion on the table to approve, the North Carolina required to have a consistency statement. And on the screen would be a motion, move to amend the zoning ordinance of the town by rezoning the 9.44 acre tract, single phase being 5.93 and the two phase being 3.51 acres of property, case K784 from RS20 and HBS to LBS, despite the fact that the rezoning would not be consistent with the town comprehensive plan. The rezoning is reasonable in the public interest, and here's two recommended interest statements. The town of Kernersville comprehensive land use plan calls for the site to be a part of a commercial neighborhood center to better serve the surrounding neighborhoods. A 35,920 plus or minus square foot grocery store is needed. Secondly, the proposed special use district condition allows the site plan to meet the commercial neighborhood development design elements to create a village setting with building fronting the primary streets. So the board may want to consider, they're considering the approval, and it's not consistent with the comprehensive plan, which it does not have to be. This would be a recommended consistency statement in motion.
And then the site plan approval of the conditions is presented in the planning board report. How the petitioner has asked the board to look at condition 7, A and B as regards to the food and drug store, and condition 8 as to placement of the building. Would the site plan submitted or the written conditions take precedence in this case?
The site plan would be modified based upon the current conditions. So the conditions would overwrite the site plan.
Unless the board modified the conditions.
Correct.
Okay. All right, Mr. Cruz, now that you have this information from staff, how would you like to word your motion?
I'd like to approve the rezoning and change the ordinance on it to allow this property to be developed as we've discussed for food line, drugstore.
So with,
I'm sorry.
go ahead, John. Yes.
If I may, Alderman Cruz, I think added with what you've just said as far as a motion, you might add to that your motion would follow the draft motion for approval, not being consistent with the plan as the planning director has outlined.
Okay, I'd like to.
Are you okay with that?
Yes, sir. I'd like to go as Mr. Wolf recommended that. No, it's not with our staff planning, but I'd like to go with the motion that Mr. Wolf said and rezone it and allow the petitioner to follow our guidelines.
And then, Mr. Wolf, does that motion include having the site plan revised so that the grocery store moves its location, or does that handle the concern of the site plan controlling?
Well, I believe, as was stated earlier, the conditions will supersede the site plan. The site plan will have to be redrafted to be in conformity with those conditions. And the motion as stated, I believe, will take care of that. Alderman Cruz stated that he wanted the conditions as set forth by the planning director and the planning staff. And so I think all of that together in the motion presents the fact that those conditions will supersede the original site plan, and a new site plan will be developed or will have to be developed.
Okay, Alderman Cruz, is that your motion?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Wolf.
Okay, is there a second?
Yes, sir.
I'll second.
Okay, I have a motion and a second. And typically, Mr. Wolf, at this point, we've asked the petitioner if they are in agreement with the conditions. But I understand that this will maybe be perhaps the first case that we have new legislation whereby the petitioner has the opportunity to sign the ordinance along with Mr. Hatling's signature. So my question to you is, do I still ask that question at this point, or does the petitioner decide whether or not they're okay with the conditions? Does that occur at the time they have the opportunity to sign the ordinance?
I think you, I'm sorry.
It's that recent change under GS 160D-703B, State Law 2019-111, Part 1.
Yes, ma'am. And I think that certainly you can ask Mr. Thomas at this time if his client wants to state whether or not it or they would be willing to sign off on the conditions as set forth by the planning staff, or you may go ahead with a vote. If Mr. Thomas does not wish to do that, you can go ahead with a vote, and then he and his clients would have an opportunity to sign off at a later time.
Okay. All right. Since there's been so much discussed, let me make sure we're all on the same place. Mr. Hooker, do you have the motion?
I have Alderman Cruz made a motion to approve the ordinance in spite of not being consistent with the land use plan, as with the conditions and the site plan as presented by the planning director and discussed by the board.
Do you have a second?
Let's not say in spite of. I don't think that's the way it was worded, and I don't think that that's proper for the minutes. You could say as an alternative, it could say anything but in spite of, I don't like.
Jeff, can you go back to that other screen?
I think Jeff had it spelled Despite.
Yes. Correct, despite. Are you okay with despite, John?
I am okay with despite, yes.
That's actually what I have written down. I just spoke, I said in spite instead of despite. Sorry.
Okay, that's fine. That's fine.
Okay, and then do you have a second?
Second from Alderman Penix.
Okay. All right, Mr. Thomas, would you like to answer that question at this point in time, or just utilize the new legislation that your client can decide at the time they sign the ordinance?
I need to make sure I get a understanding. In looking at the conditions under 7, it indicated site plan redesigned, village setting, and has 3 conditions: building pulled up to the streets, double fronted buildings along the streets, and pedestrian walkways. As to phase 1, or one phase as it's stated at various places, we had submitted a site plan with a building on it. 2 phase has no buildings on it. And it is our wish and desire that the site plan as we presented it for phase 1, that shows the grocery store, I guess you could say at the back line, and the parking lot at the front, is what the petitioner desires. And I'm not sure that in listening, that if the conditions as it stands today, and as y'all have talked about, it sounds like that those conditions apply both to phase 1 and phase 2, so that the presented site plan would have to be changed. I think that's the way I understand it.
Mr. Hatley, can you respond to that?
Well, I'll jump in and I'll say that yes, it would apply to both. You in agreement, Jeff?
Yes, up on the screen to your right would basically, the grocery store basically stay in the same spot with the parking in front. And then the only real changes on the out parcels, one of the out parcels would be between the parking lot and the North Main Street. So, there's an illustration. And this was in the staff report, the planning board report. We also shared this at the DRC with the developer. So the grocery store would basically be in the same site with the same parking layout. Difference would be it would be an out parcel along North Main Street. So that your parking lot would be somewhat configured, but just a sketch illustration of what the condition would call for.
I'm looking at the plan. It's kind of small and I got bad eyes, but anyway, there are 3 out parcels in phase 2, which the buildings have not been placed. Thank you. The buildings, of course, are not on it yet, but that is phase 2, and they would have to well, whatever the geography allows, but basically, as you've got on that plan, it shows 3 buildings, and that's generally what would have to happen. there shows a building on the present site plan along North Main Street down next to the street. But I'm assuming that we don't really count that because the site plan as submitted doesn't have one. There's just one building on that, the site plan with the parking and the grocery store and that type of thing. So, but I want to get it clear. Sometimes I'm kind of dense. What we're talking about for phase one would be that the grocery store building, 35,009, whatever it is, right at 36,000 square feet, would stay exactly where it is. And that the parking, as shown, would stay just like it is. And that would be approved. Am I right?
The way the condition is written, it gives the developer some flexibility to move the grocery store around on the backside and also move his parking to accommodate his parking needs. And so the condition gives the developer flexibility to accommodate that front out parcel that would be between North Main Street and the grocery store parking lot.
Ray, this is Curtis. Let me ask Jeff a question real quick, if you don't mind. Can it stay like it is, Jeff, on the site plan?
Yeah, the parking lot could, the building could stay like it is. It's just the parking lot would have to be reconfigured to accommodate that front out parcel.
Okay, but I think Ray's question is, and my question is as well, if they build phase one, which is the grocery store first, they can still put the parking lot in front of the grocery store, correct?
With the modification and allow for an out parcel to be between the North Main Street and that parking lot, as illustrated on the screen.
Okay, but go ahead, Ray. I'm sorry.
On the site plan, there is no other building. There's one building on the site plan, and that's the grocery store. And the one up on North Main, there's none there. I want to get that. My understanding, when we get through with this, both phases, that unless you put another building on one of those out parcels, there's only going to be 4 buildings on that whole project. And the ones in the out parcel, as you've got illustrated, Jeff, you're about right, because you just look at the size, depends on what it is. And on the grocery store side, which would be on the south side of all that property, the one up front, there's nothing, it's not shown at all. So there would be the only building on the 5.9 acres would be a grocery store, and that's it. I mean, that's what I've understood all along. And if that can happen, and it sounds like that's what you're saying,
it is not.
Then we have no problem.
It is not what I'm saying.
Let me ask a question. If that building on the same out parcel that the grocery store is on, if the building between the parking lot and North Main Street goes away, like Ray said, it's not going to be there, then does the grocery store have to move up front and have the parking lot behind it?
No.
So if the grocery store is the only one built on that parcel, it can be built just like it's shown on the screen. Parking lot in the front, grocery store at the back, and no building between the parking lot and North Main. It can be built that way. Is that correct?
you'd have to change the conditions.
That's not my question. Can it be built with the food line there and the parking lot in front of it and no building between the parking lot and North Main?
No.
How would it have to be built?
As illustrated on this site plan on the screen, there would be a building along North Main Street.
No, wait a minute. I'm not asking you about a building on North Main. Ray's already said there's not going to be a building on the out parcel with the grocery store. If there's not a building on the out parcel with the grocery store, how does that parcel have to look? You're putting too many buildings in it. Just stick with the grocery store and the parking lot.
If you were going to do that, you would remove condition. Ray had recommended, I believe, that his client was acceptable to condition number 8. He was also on the site plan, he was acceptable that the 3 out parcels meet the village setting, but not the single phase. So for the single phase, just to have the grocery store, you would have to have a modified condition as Ray presented in his public comments.
That's what I was getting to.
I think that was a very good question, because I'm sitting here looking at this on the screen and saying to myself, I think I know what is meant by the motion. I think I know what's meant by the conditions from planning staff. I'm not sure how that's all going to go together in light of the fact that it's showing a building on North Main Street in front of the grocery store with parking in between and over top that building.
Yep.
And I think there are too many things being said. I think that this is an extremely important point, and I believe that Jeff and Ray need to talk this out before we go further with motion from the board.
And I think is what Jeff has indicated. Jeff, if that building that is on North Main Street on the same parcel as the grocery store, the building that Ray says will disappear, if that building is not there, and I think Ray asked this, then the food line would have to be moved up to the road front with the parking lot behind it, correct? If the conditions stay the same as they are right now.
I think it's difficult for me to answer that. This all started at the Development Review Committee level, and during the 2 public hearings, there were no comments on the conditions. And as Attorney John Wolf mentioned, to me, it's not clear on these questions, so it's very difficult for me to answer the questions without more specific information of what the applicant wants.
And I'm just asking this for my clarification. Basically, the conditions are worded in a way that the parking lot has to be behind a building, correct?
Correct. And the conditions are written to be flexible to, allow for different building configurations and different parking lot configurations.
So if it has to be behind the building and the only building on that parcel is going to be food line, then the parking lot, it would assume, would have to be behind that building.
Not as recommended by the staff. To create that village setting, you would still, staff has still recommended the grocery store be located as illustrated with a out parcel out front.
I'm not talking about the out parcel up front. I'm talking about if the out parcel up front is gone, would staff recommend it to be like it is on the plan right now with that building, the out parcel up front gone? Because Ray has said that building is not going to be there. And I agree with John. This needs to be figured out, because I don't want the developer to come in and say, I'm not putting a building there, and you told me I could leave the food line and parking lot where they are.
So So staff recommendation is in the condition that was presented at the public hearings at the planning board and board of aldermen is the grocery store would stay where it is, would be slightly adjusted, and there would be an out parcel between North Main Street and the parking lot. The grocery store could not be up on North Main Street.
But I hear Ray Thomas saying, Ray, correct me if I'm wrong, I hear Ray Thomas saying that the grocery store will be approximately where it is shown on this plan, site plan that we have in front of us. But that the building that is fronting, for a better word, North Main Street is not going to be built. Is that correct, Ray?
That is correct.
Then I think we have to remove that from this site plan and ask the question of the board ultimately, but first of you, Jeff, the parking that is now showing that would be facing or adjacent to North Main Street, is that acceptable where it is? I hear you saying no.
Yeah, I would, if the board, Ray has, you might want to ask Ray for his specific recommendations that he last sent this afternoon or this morning. And that might, I think that will clarify what the applicant is requesting. Ray, do you have that? Do you want me to pull that up?
No, I've got it. Well, certainly. If you want to, if the board wants to see it. And those were revised.
I've got a picture of a revised one. I don't know if I can. Joe just brought me his.
I can pull it up here. I'll hit that in a second.
The revised one I had did not have that building, that second building on that site where the grocery store is. There's no building there. It was just the grocery store and the parking lot in front of it.
Yeah, so on the screen now is the current recommendation by the applicant, which would allow for the grocery store and parking lot to stay as is.
I'd like to interrupt for one moment. Mr. Hatling, if you can put that on hold. Mr. Thompson needs to step out for a moment. Can I have a motion to excuse Mr. Thompson from the meeting?
I'll make that motion.
I have a motion by Alderman Boyer. Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
Second by Alderman Cruz. My apologies, it has to be a roll count. Alderman Cruz, how do you vote?
How to vote on the recommendation for Chris to step out?
Yes.
In favor, thank you.
Thank you. Chris, how do you vote?
In favor, thank you, and I'll be right back. I apologize.
Thank you. Let us know when you're back. Alderman Penix?
In favor, thank you.
Thank you. Alderman Boyer?
In favor, thank you.
Thank you. It's unanimous. All right, Mr. Hatling?
Yes, so Ray, can you see the screen?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so go ahead. You can explain your condition.
Okay. The provisions for 7A and 7B, and they actually state, this is on the conditions that were attached, and it said, A, buildings pulled up to the street. We would not want that one for phase 1, but it's fine for phase 2. Double fronted buildings along the streets, and that would be for phase 2, but not phase 1. And then pedestrian walkways, and that's fine for all of them, for phase 1 and for phase 2. And then we had some issues about the Central Kernersville Overlay District, but after re-examining, and this applies to both phases, that's acceptable. And, but just want to make it clear that the site plan as submitted by the petitioner and originally, and then it has been changed with certain things and that the staff wanted. But anyway, that is what we have to have. It's the position of the building and the parking lot. And there is nothing else on phase one except that building and the parking lot. And so that's why we would, that's why 7A and 7B would be eliminated, because they wouldn't be applicable unless you're going to move the grocery store up to the front of the street. But that's not acceptable to the petitioner. They want what they've got as submitted, and which was attached to the proposed ordinance, at least showing the what it looked like as submitted. That's what we're agreeable to. And then, of course, phase two's got to go through design and so forth, whatever is put on those three lots. And those buildings would be pulled up to the street, depending on what it is, and double fronted buildings along streets just depends on where it is and how it can go on there. So hopefully that everybody understands. But if the ordinance is passed that says we keep the site plan for phase one as is, then we're happy with that, with the exceptions of 7A and 7B. And then, quite frankly, phase two is all of those conditions would be involved in phase two, but that will have to be for another day as far as what the building looks like, what it is, and where it is.
Does the site plan already show the sidewalk network required in 7C on the first phase? Or would you would you accept the condition of 7C still applying to the grocery store phase?
Yeah, I think they would agree to, the sidewalks. And I think primarily sidewalks would be leading, Jeff can correct me, but it'd be leading primarily from the grocery store area, if they need sidewalks, into the other areas, the 3 out parcels. There is a street there, an inside street, if you will.
Yeah, the site plan for the single phase currently has the required pedestrian network and sidewalks. The only real difference, so I guess in summary, as Ray stated, if the Board of Aldermen wish, in the condition, it would be the conditions as recommended by the staff and planning board, with the change that the single phase rezoning, single phase site plan would not include moving of the building or an alt parcel.
The members of the board, you stop me or tell me to be quiet, but I'll tell you that I think I know what is being said, but I also think that this can be misconstrued in the future. And I want the board to have before it whatever tools it needs, including revised mapping. I don't mean continuing this meeting. I'm talking about something being put together for you to see. Phase 1, phase 2, this is what would happen, and this is what would happen. I have no idea where the vote is going in this matter, but I think that from the standpoint of the importance of this potential rezoning or not rezoning, and the future of this, I don't want questions from either the petitioner or a future developer or from anyone on the board or staff as to what is being said. And I'm not so sure I understand, with all deference to my good friend Ray Thomas. I think I understand Ray, but I'm hearing that your petitioner is not going to follow through on constructing that building on North Main Street. And does that not change phase 1 completely?
John, I would like, the only comment I can make, I have never, since I've represented my client, seen a map, anything with on the phase 1 site plan other than a grocery store and a parking lot. I have never seen one. I'm looking right now for a rather large map that I had, and I can't find it, but that shows exactly what I'm saying. And if you look at the ordinance that was a proposed ordinance that was submitted and is, my understanding, a pretty common thing with the Board of Aldermen giving us suggestion and so forth, it doesn't even show a building. My copy's kind of faded, but it just shows exactly what was submitted in the very beginning, and may have been some adjustment through DRC and that type of thing, but it only shows one building, and I don't know where this other building came from. I've never seen it. And from the very beginning, my clients indicated there's one building located in phase 1, and that was all about the grocery store. So I think if I can find my map,
he has it up.
Bring it, and then everybody can look at it. Jeff may have the same thing. That's what it shows.
Ray Jeff has put up a map that shows basically the site plan.
Yeah.
Of the grocery store phase.
Yeah, we have to, I think, put in a pond or something. But anyway, you can see that, let's see here. Okay, I can see better. It shows the entrance that the DOT is directing. There's 2 entrances, one off of Macy Grove and one off of North Main. And then it shows that site plan and shows one building and then a parking area, and that's it.
Then, Jeff, I would ask you, the map that you put before the board today, the site plan or whatever, is showing, definitely showing a shaded area for a building that is adjacent to, contiguous, whatever, to North Main Street with parking in between. Is that an accurate map, or should that be pulled and work for another map? Work with another map?
The current map being shown is the current submittal by the applicant The illustration that staff shown earlier was a part of the planning board report. And so the applicant is recommending that the single phase, which I'm now showing, be approved to allow for the building as shown and the parking lot as shown with no out parcels in that single phase section.
Then would you tell us the planning staff, planning board, what recommendations are forthcoming, and do they in fact align with what you earlier showed?
The planning board recommendation and staff recommendation, along with the current recommendation from the applicant, are in agreement with one exception, and that one exception being the site plan you're now seeing, there would be a out parcel to the front. And so really the only question for the Board of Aldermen is, do they desire to recommend approval of this single phase as shown, or with an out parcel along North Main Street?
Then I would say, Mayor, that certainly has to be clarified and incorporated within a motion. And I think you have a second to it. So I think that it might be best if, who was it that made the second? Was that you, Kenny? Or
And it was Joe Penix. Can I ask a question, John?
Yes, sir.
I'd like to ask Jeff a question. Since Ray Thomas said they never submitted a plan with an out parcel in the front of the food line, and I've never seen one. I just showed Curtis one that looks just like this one. This is the only configuration I've ever seen with just the food line on that property. Where did the plat come that had the second building on that property?
That was included in the staff report and the planning board report to explain the conditions for number 7.
So number 7, Jeff, as it stands now, in order for what we see on the screen right now to be effective, that condition would have to be eliminated. Is that correct?
Yes, it would have to be eliminated for the single phase section. The applicant is agreeing that it would apply to the 2-phase section.
Madam Mayor,
Madam Mayor, can I ask?
I'm sorry. My apologies for interrupting again. Chris Thomas is rejoining the call.
Can I do one thing? My client is in South
Hang on a
Carolina.
minute, Ray. Mateus, if you can look. Hang on a minute, Ray. Caller number 2. Is this Chris Thompson?
It is, and I do apologize.
Okay, so Keith Hooker, if you could mark Chris Thompson again present for the meeting. He had to leave for a few minutes, but he is again on the call. We can hear him and he can hear what's happening at the meeting. My apologies for the interruption. Ray Thomas, I believe you have the floor.
I just briefly, I've gotten a call from my client. Obviously I'm here and I'm not going to talk to him while I'm got you. If I could have call him, he's watching. I'm advised on YouTube, and I can verify what I've said. But I'm pretty sure that I'm correct. The only thing on phase 1 The only building is what you see. But I can verify that, because I probably need to do that, because he's been very clear to me that the we'll call it the grocery store site is, it's imperative that they can get that approved, and never talked about having another thing on that 5.8 or whatever it is acres. What the parking lot and the building, and then of course there's rules about the dumpster and all that sort of thing. And
Ray, are you asking for a few moments to confer with the
Yes,
client
ma'am.
you represent? Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
And Madam Mayor,
Yes.
Madam Mayor, because I was going to suggest the same thing, but not only Ray to talk with his client, but I think for Jeff to take the time to put this together for the board to see, and it can be just sketched out, Jeff, handwritten, to take the site plan that we see before us and show the conditions, 7 and 8, and what would be in a motion and what would not be in a motion in regard to that. And then from the standpoint of the planning staff's recommendation, what would happen with conditions 7, A and B, and 8. I think this clearly needs to be before the board in order for a good motion. I shouldn't say that was a bad motion that was made, but I think we need to, in effect, start over and know what we're talking about.
All right, then Mr. Cruz, would you like to withdraw your motion?
Yes, ma'am. What we've heard here is getting confusing as to what is and what's not. And I want to clear it all up, and I want to make sure that we're all understanding exactly what we're making a motion for. So I agree with backing up and giving Mr. Thomas time to confer with his client, and Jeff to draw up a plan that would be acceptable and would be legal for us to look at and consider.
Mr. Penix, would you like to withdraw your second?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so Mr. Hatling has said that this information has been in the planning staff report, and so it seems that he has the information. Mr. Ray needs a few minutes to talk with his clients. Mr. Wolf, are you thinking that a 15-minute recess would do this, or do we need more time? If you could turn your microphone on, please.
I may not be the one to answer that. Ray, how long do you think it might take to talk with your client?
I've got a feeling I'll be able to get him pretty quick. And it may be 20 minutes or so, but 15 might work.
Jeff, how long do you think it might take you to put something together the board could see?
It'll take me about 5 minutes to show the two options. It's pretty simple. They're just really in front of us right now. There's just the applicant's recommendation and then the staff recommendation. So it'll take me about 5 minutes to show the two, so the board will be very clear on what they would be recommending for the conditions and site plan.
Okay, I showed 3:01 as the time. Let's reconvene at 3:18. So the board will stand in recess.
Okay.
And I think it's important for Ray to see that in writing and ask the Food Lion people if they would accept either of the options on the conditions. I would hate to approve something and then have them say that's not what we want to do. I think he needs to see that and talk with his client on that.
Thank you, Mr. Boyer. The meeting is in recess until 3:18. Thank you. I'd like to welcome everybody back from recess to the regular meeting of the Kernersville Board of Aldermen. We're continuing continuing our discussion of public hearing 1A on the agenda, zoning docket K784. We just took a brief recess and we're continuing our discussion. Mr. Wolf, did you want to start, or Mr. Hatling, Mr. Thomas?
Well, I will say to you that my client, in fact, I sent to the alderman a letter, I guess would it be about a week ago, and in that was a site plan, and I believe I've got it. I can attach it and send it if that's what you would like, and it shows on phase 1. It shows one building of 35,929, almost 36,000. Parking lot, entrance off of North Main, I believe that's a right in, right out only, and an entrance off of Macy Grove Road. And then it shows the 3 out parcels, really with nothing on them other than the dividing line, and a road that runs from County Line Road actually goes into that phase 1. And it shows the parking lot, and that's it. There is no other lot for anything. And it's exactly that. I will give you my suggestion, and then y'all can do with it as you would do. It seems to me that needs to be changed if this is where we're going. As far as the petitioner is concerned, when you get down to the proposed ordinance that was submitted, it shows building design and site plan. And then I think all you would have to do, you would submit phase 1. You would approve phase 1 as submitted, the site plan. With pedestrian walkways. I think Jeff said they were already on there.
Yeah, Ray.
Pardon?
Ray, up on the screen up there.
Yes, sir.
I have that condition number 7, reading the site plan shall be redesigned to include a village setting for the 2-phase section that shall include. Actually, let me rewrite that. Let me write that right here. So it'd be a village setting for the 2-phase section that shall include, which would mean if you went with that condition, that would approve the single phase that's presented to the right.
Okay.
There's 2 of them on the right, Jeff. It would be the one on the bottom on the right, correct?
If the Board of Aldermen went with the revised condition, it would be the upper site plan as Ray sent them in the mail and also as part of the record. So if they went with the modified condition number 7 as presented on the slide, the single phase would be approved as presented by the applicant, and the second phase portion would be designed in the village setting. If you kept,
Okay.
Yeah.
And to be perfectly clear, as Alderman Cruz was saying at the beginning of the meeting, that as we've been talking about the design of the grocery store, which is identified as phase 1 or 1 phase because it's the site plan and the rezoning are submitted all at the same time. So it is the same as was sent to the aldermen, but it's also the same as has been available online for the citizens' review and submitted by petitioner for staff's review. And that is, as Mr. Swisher and Mr. Hatling indicated, the drawing at the top, building and parking layout based on revised condition. And that layout only shows the food and drug store, the grocery store.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Correct.
If this is the direction that the board goes, then it looks like we got phase 2 in, and they're subject to those conditions. And then number 7 would not be applicable to phase 1. And I'm assuming, Jeff, you're saying those pedestrian walkways are already on that plan.
Correct.
I think I'm right. Aren't those walkways also, they have to have look different? They look like sidewalks instead of.
Yeah, there's some other minor conditions, but yes, Ray, to answer your question, the site plan that is an upper site plan with the yellow highlighted area above it. If the Board of Aldermen modified the condition, it would be the site plan that you had submitted to the Aldermen.
Okay.
And that's been available for the public to view, correct?
Correct.
Okay, so condition 8, Mr. Thomas, on behalf of the petitioner, also raised the issue of condition number 8. Is there any modification, Mr. Hatling, you recommend to condition number 8 as to phase 1, as to maybe the placement of the building on the site plan?
No, the applicant and staff both agree keeping condition 8.
Okay, and condition 8 does allow the building to be placed as it's shown on the site plan, because some parts of that central business overlay encourage pulling buildings up to North Main Street.
Yeah, yes, the condition number 8 would not impact the layout.
Okay.
But it does impact the design, and as Kernersville loves, and I think it's a good idea, you got a lot of brick. But that's what the overlay tells you about what your design looks like, and features, and then materials and things that you can use to accent. You can use wood with brick and all kinds of things. It just depends on how you want to do it. But as far as design and materials, I think we go along with that. And that would be for both phases.
Mr. Hatling, do you have anything else to add?
I do not.
Do you have any suggestions then for the board or for Mr. Cruz in a new motion?
Yeah, I mean, they have a motion for approval of the rezoning that Keith has stated and repeated, and the only modification now would be if the Board of Aldermen chooses to modify the site plan conditions. If they choose to modify the site plan conditions, staff would recommend, as presented on the slide, that number 7 would read, a village setting with a 2-phase section shall include the A, B, and C, which would keep the site plan as submitted.
Okay. Mr. Thomas, do you have any further comment?
No, it looks like Jeff did a good job on that.
Thank you. Mr. Wolf, do you have any further comment?
I personally don't like buildings, quote, pulled up to, unquote, the streets. Is there some other phrase we might use there, Jeff? Buildings, not adjacent to, but running along the streets. Ray, you got a suggestion? I just don't like that pulled up to the streets. Horizontal to the streets.
He's got buildings adjacent to it'd be the right of way of the streets at least. Let me, you know how we lawyers are. We always going to bring something up to start something up. Here's what you got. When you look at the out parcels, there is an inner street. It's not public, it's private, but it services from County Line Road down into phase 1. And those parcels are located along that. One of which it's going to be kind of hard. In fact, a previous map that Jeff had presented kind of showed about where those things would look like they're going to end up. And when you start pulling up to the streets, you got 2 lots that border County Line and one borders North Main. But the access into those lots, and a lot of times this is, I guess, the village effect, would be along the inside road that is on this property and not necessarily the public streets. I'm sure everybody be glad to do it any way they can, but when you start doing it, it's a lot of based on topography and so forth, and they got to be close to a street. But I don't know that it's going to be. I think staff would agree with this because it looks like just. What has been put on there, you're probably not utilizing a public street. You'd be utilizing the inner street that runs out of the phase 1 directly north to County Line Road. Be glad. Whatever's going to fit's fine, but till you do it.
So I just updated that to read. Based upon what Ray's comment was and John's comment, A would read, buildings along North Main and County Line Road shall be adjacent to the right-of-way of the streets. And that addresses Ray's concern about that out parcel that sits off that entrance road. So we're only talking about there's 2 out parcels along North Main Street and County Line Road. So that would address those 2 comments.
Okay, is there further discussion or comments by the board, or is there a motion?
So what would that do by our parking? If it's going to be directly on North Main, we don't want the building to be pulled right down to the sidewalk. That looks like a dangerous route for Highway 150 with inner and where our stoplight at County Line with our traffic. So when we were talking about stepping back with parking in the front, that's my concern. We need it back to where it's not a hazard to the motoring public.
Yeah, the second phase that we're talking about, with the current roadway design, the sidewalks that would be constructed, and then the front lawn area of the building, you'd have, your sight distance would be there, for that intersection. So your sight distance would be protected at that intersection.
I'm not looking at the map the drawing right now of that second phase, but I think two of the out parcels would be easy to put along North Main Street. The other one, it looks like it's a pretty narrow land on County Line Road. That third parcel, that might be more on this inner road that Ray was talking about. Does that make any sense?
Yes, sir.
Yes. So
I'm not sure that including the word County Line Road.
You're right. Let me adjust that condition. Buildings, it's parcel 1 and 2. Parcel 1 and 2 buildings shall be adjacent to the right-of-way of the public streets. So that would be clarification. That would clarify lot 3 would be basically more adjacent to the grocery store.
Yeah. Would it be clear to say out parcel just to differentiate that from the phase 1?
Yep. Okay.
Does that look better for you, Ray?
Yeah, and but of course we have to. There's going to have to be setbacks. So even if you went to the right of way, I think you would even have setbacks from whatever your code is.
Yeah. Yeah, you'd have to address Kenny's concern. You'd have your natural sidewalk and setbacks, and so you'd have plenty of distance.
So you really, the right of way would be the actually beginning line from what you would set back, because of course the DOT doesn't like people building in their right of ways.
So you'd have plenty of setback off the road.
Okay, yeah.
Is there further discussion or questions? Mr. Penix, do you have anything?
No, ma'am.
Mr. Thompson?
Not at this time. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Boyer?
I'm fine with how it's set up.
Mr. Cruz, you made the motion before. Would you like to make a motion?
Ma'am, I'll make a motion that we accept modified number 1 with the terms and conditions and site plan that was presented to the board and to the public.
Okay, and then with also the, since you withdrew the first motion, it is no longer in effect at all. So do you want to also include what you did in the first motion as to Mr. Hatling's proposed motion as it relates to the land use plan? Mr. Hatling, perhaps you could put that back up again.
Yes, ma'am. I'd like to accept it as it's not recommended by the staff but to change our modifications to allow as was presented to the board.
Mr. Hooker, do you have that motion?
Madam Mayor, if Jeff could post that back up on the screen, we could have Alderman Cruz read it. That would probably be better.
Okay, Mr. Hatling?
Yeah,
You're sharing your screen still with us, but we see the site plan. So basically you're saying, Mr. Hatling, that you've revised condition 7, so it no longer reads how it did in the original staff report. And so a motion to approve, as Mr. Cruz is considering making, would include the new condition 7.
Correct.
Okay. And Mr. Hooker, you have the wording of the new condition 7, correct?
Only by virtue of it being on the screen at the moment, I'll have to get it from Jeff in writing.
Okay, well, you take a minute. Do you want Jeff to read it out loud? So it's recorded in your voice recording?
Actually, that would be good if Jeff could go back and read the recommended ordinance for approval.
Yes,
and then
Jeff could.
state with the revised condition 7, and then we can have Kenny make a motion to approve based on the wording from community development.
Okay, Jeff, if you
Whatever
could,
wording John would recommend.
if you could start, if this is in accord with what John Wolf would recommend, Jeff, if you could start with the draft motion that you had previously presented. And Mr. Wolf, does that sound reasonable?
Yes, ma'am, it does.
Okay, Mr. Hatling?
One change.
Okay.
Okay, so the motion regarding rezoning, move to amend the zoning ordinance of the town by rezoning the 9.44 acre tract with a single phase being 5.93 and two phase being 3.51 acres. Property in case K784 from RS20 and HBS to LBS. Despite the fact that the rezoning would not be consistent with the comprehensive plan, the rezoning is reasonable in the public interest because, one, the town of Kernersville comprehensive land use plan calls for the site to be part of a commercial neighborhood center to better serve the surrounding neighborhoods. A 35,929 square foot grocery store plus or minus is needed. Secondly, the proposed special use district condition allow the site plan to meet the commercial neighborhood development design standards to create a village setting with buildings fronting the primary streets for the two-phase section. And regarding the site plan, approval of the site plan and conditions with a modification to condition 7 to read, a village setting for the two-phase section shall include A, all parcel 1 and 2 buildings shall be adjacent to the right-of-way of the public streets. B, double fronting buildings along the street, and C, pedestrian walkways. So that would be the motion for the rezoning and the motion for the site plan as discussed.
Okay, Alderman Cruz?
I'd like to make a motion accepting number 7, A, B, and C as Mr. Hatland just read.
And the first part of what he read as well?
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Hooker, do you have that motion?
Yes, ma'am. I can take Mr. Hatling's wording and use that as the motion if Alderman Cruz is acceptable to that.
Okay, Mr. Wolf,
Yes,
is that a
sir.
proper motion?
Yes, ma'am, it is.
Okay, thank you. Do I have a second?
I second.
I have a second from Alderman Penix. Before we vote, are there any further comments?
I think it's designed as well as we can. However, I'll still have to cast my vote.
All right, I'll call the question. Alderman Cruz, how do you vote?
In favor, thank you.
Thank you. Alderman Thompson, how do you vote?
Mayor, I'd just like to make a quick statement.
Certainly.
It's been one of the hardest decisions I feel like that we've had to make since I've been on the Board of Aldermen, just because of everything that's involved. I want to thank Food Line for being a partner with Kernersville, since, like they mentioned, in the 1970s, and staff for doing all the work that they've done on this as well. That being said, I'm in full agreement that we need a new or updated grocery store on the north end. I think that it's well overdue. I also feel like we might have something else there had we not been held hostage with the lease on the old Lowe's building. But I also feel like that us going against this land use plan and moving a grocery store or building a grocery store that far down the north side, we're putting the small business owners at risk that have built their businesses around that side of town, because that's where the businesses are. And changing the land use plan and moving a grocery store down there and leaving a dead spot, in my opinion, in that area, I just don't think that's a good idea. And due to those reasons, I don't approve of this.
Okay, so you're voting against.
That's correct. Thank you.
Alderman Penix?
In favor.
Alderman Boyer?
I respectfully oppose the rezoning.
Okay, so you're voting against.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so we have a tie in the vote. My understanding of the procedure is that in a tie vote, the mayor casts a vote. John Wolf, would just like to confirm that with you.
You're correct, Mayor.
Okay, does it have a second reading, or is this the final decision?
This is the final decision.
Okay.
You will now decide the case.
Okay, thank you. Procedurally, with the 5 elected aldermen, it is not very frequent that the mayor does cast the deciding vote. In looking at this case, I've considered a lot of comments from citizens, some favor and some against. I have driven past and around this site, and I've been involved in planning and zoning in Kernersville for many years. In that time, I've observed that the 2 most recent grocery stores that we have approved, the grocery store that's the Walmart neighborhood store at Union Cross Road, was designated as a neighborhood commercial center. The grocery store Lowe's Foods on South Main Street that was recently constructed was also designated as a neighborhood commercial center. Both of those grocery stores have a greater square footage than the proposed Food Lion grocery store. Neither of those tracts were limited to 20,000 square feet as the maximum size for the largest business to be located there. Petitioner has made efforts to comply with the appearance standards of the town to agree to the village setting. Given that how the zoning case is presented, they do have to agree to the conditions placed by staff. I do think that there is a lot of traffic in the South Main Street area. I feel like we've already done a major road improvement at the intersection of where the roads come together, Piney Grove and North Main and Cherry Street. We've done a major road improvement there already. There's no more ability really to do an additional widening at that intersection. We do know that there are times when it's difficult to get to South Main Street. There's likely going to be a point in time when the DOT replaces the bridge over Salem Parkway. And generally, a value of having commercial neighborhood centers is to distribute traffic around town, frequent areas, and reduce travel through the center of town in order to preserve our road network. It is something that is a business that would be well utilized by the many households in the area. And there are really good reasons to have taken the length of time we did it and to give this the full consideration of the board. But because of the reasons of the consistency, I feel like with the developments at our other two commercial neighborhood centers that have included grocery stores, I will cast my vote in favor of Alderman Cruz's motion. All right. Is there any further business before the board or anything else we need to attend to during this meeting?
Madam Mayor, I just need to update the board on one quick item, if that's okay.
Okay, Mr. Swisher.
Mr. Wolf and I attended court this morning on a matter involving a former employee that had embezzled some funds from the town of Kernersville. Had a good outcome in court. The employee reimbursed the town $275,850 in full. He was also sentenced to a minimum of 24 months active time, 24 to 50 months. So he has at least 24 months active time, and we were reimbursed in full for the amount that he embezzled. So it was a good outcome this morning for the town. I just wanted to pass that along to the board.
Thank you. Is there any further business before the board?
I have none, thank
Mr. Penix?
No, ma'am.
Mr. Cruz?
No, ma'am. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Boyer?
No, ma'am.
All right, this meeting, I need a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Motion by Alderman Thompson. Do I have a second?
I second.
Second by Alderman Penix. And since this is a remote meeting, we do a roll call vote. Mr. Cruz, how do you vote?
In favor, thank you.
Thank you. Alderman Thompson?
In favor, thank you. Everybody have a good weekend.
Thank you. Alderman Penix?
In favor, thank you.
Thank you. Alderman Boyer?
In favor, thank you.
Thank you. This meeting is now adjourned.